welcome to HITC Sport. Today let's take a look at every Premier League club's most
horrendously awful season in the top flight.
Now I'm not just talking about every club's lowest finish. For example, Chelsea finished in the bottom 10 a bunch of times before Roman Abramovich came around.
And nobody batted an eyelid.
If they did that nowadays, a bunch of fans would probably be close to slamming their heads in a fucking car door. Anyway, if you disagree with any of my selections, let me know in the comment section below. What do you think was your worst season as a fan? Now let's crack on. Arsenal 94-95. If you listen to the Arsenal fans, you think every season was their worst since the dawn of time.
Oh no, our title challenge is over too soon. We're out of Europe too early.
That's like a fella complaining his brand new Rolex no longer fits his wrist and that his arms are too small for his diamond coat. Back in 94-95 they had real problems, plummeting from 4th to 12th. For God's sake, they nearly got themselves relegated. I'm not sure how poor old Claude managed to get through his GCSEs that year. George Graham had been sacked after a bung scandal, and Stuart Houston, who oversaw 6 defeats in 7. Oh, and they were also knocked out of the FA Cup by Millwall, and no doubt had their cars broken into after the game. And to top it all off, I mean, they did reach the final of the European Cup Winners' Cup, only to lose it after David Seaman got lobbed by Naeem, a former Spurs player, so of course they celebrated like they'd won the World Cup. Bournemouth 15-16. Bournemouth have had 3 excellent seasons in the top flight. For Christ's sake, 10 years ago this club was nearly spunked up a tree. Now they're beating the big clubs and spending tens of millions on players. Like, they haven't had a worse season in the Premier League, alright? But I have to pick one, so 15-16. Even though that was still a great year for them. Brighton 17-18. Oh, Jesus Christ. Again, Brighton have literally only been in the Premier League for 1 year. So their best and worst season was last season when they finished 15th. Burnley 09-10.
Will be a valuable point towards our ultimate goal, which is staying in the Premier League.
Burnley can fuck off.
It's fair to say Burnley fans don't like Owen Coyle very much. Christ, that's an understatement. They probably like him about as much as drinking a bowl of 3-week-old spit. The bitterness from Burnley fans when he walked out on them for Bolton Wanderers in January 2010 was unreal. It was sort of like being dumped 3 hours before your high school dance, so instead of going as a desperate Lone Ranger, you're forced to bring the dog instead. Sorry, Brian Laws, but yeah. Coyle had Burnley as high as 9th in November. They were 14th in January. They beat Man United. This should have been a great season for them. But no, Laws was about as good at managing a top-flight football team as David Nugent was at scoring goals in the Premier League. 3 more wins as the club slid off a map into the Championship abyss. It all worked out in the end though. I mean, Burnley just qualified for Europe last season. Bolton haven't been seen in the top flight for the last 6 years. And Coyle, Christ above, I wouldn't be surprised to see him dumped outside Subway with a can of Foster's in one hand and a tin of change in the other. Cardiff City 13-14. Just like Burnley, Cardiff City were actually doing alright for the first half of their season, and then it all went to shit when the manager left. Malky Mackay was sacked despite beating Man City and Swansea and doing fairly well. Then again, this was the same owner that decided the Bluebirds should play in red. Just because. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's impact? I mean, was it an impact? Well, yes, if by impact you mean coach the defence on how to play like a bunch of drunk 14-year-olds who've never seen a football before a day in their lives. Chelsea 15-16. 14-15, Leicester finished 14th, Chelsea won the league. The next season, Chelsea finished 10th, Leicester win the league. It was just bizarre. It was a season when Jose Mourinho, one of the greatest footballing minds, turned into Alan Pardew for a season, with 9 defeats before Christmas. We're talking about Eden Hazard as a Ballon d'Or winner next year, right? He scored 4 goals that season. He scored 6 in 43 in all competitions. That's a joke. I haven't seen such a wane in power since Space Jam, for Christ's sake. Mourinho was gone by Christmas and Gus Hiddink came in. He steadied the ship somewhat with a bunch of draws and only 3 more defeats to leave the club steadily mid-table. Crystal Palace 04-05. They always say if you get a striker who scores 20 goals a season, you have half a chance of winning the league. Andy Johnson scored 21 and Palace still got relegated. So how shit must the rest of the team have been? Admittedly, 10 of those were penalties, but Wayne Routledge was also playing very well. I mean, he had more assists that season than Arjen Robben, Steven Gerrard and Cristiano Ronaldo. There were wins over Aston Villa, Tottenham and Liverpool, a home draw with Man United, like it wasn't all bad, but 18th is 18th, and Julian Speroni has been there ever since, just refusing to ever leave, just like a case of genital gonorrhea, so I've heard. Everton 03-04. This was just dreary. Christ, if you told Everton fans that they'd be finishing above the Champions League winners within 12 months, they have told you to put down the goddamn crack pipe. David Moyes is a man who's probably had more sackings than haircuts in the last 5 years, but back in 2004 he'd been at Goodison Park 2 years and was under real intense pressure. Just 9 wins all season, and I mean I know he probably hit puberty when he was about 6, but still they were relying on a teenage Wayne Rooney way too much. 17th was just They didn't even hit 40 points. And then a few months later, they went to finish 4th with Marcus Bent up front, which is like contesting the Grand National on a three-legged pony. Fulham 13-14. Like Cardiff, it was the 13-14 season. 4 years earlier, this club had smashed past Juventus and Wolfsburg to play Atletico Madrid in the Europa League final. Now they were employing Steve Sidwell and getting tonked 6-0 off Hull City. Les, when Tom Huddlestone is dancing through your midfield like Andres Iniesta, that's when you know something is seriously wrong. This season was an absolute disaster. Martin Jol was sacked in December. René Mullenstein came in and lasted 3 months. Felix Magath was the last resort, but that fella just looked like some weird army general who'd seen too much in Nam. His solution to fixing Fulham was to heal injuries with cottage cheese and forcing the players to stand perfectly still for 40 minutes in training. Did it work? It worked about as well as Courtney Cox's facelift. Christ above, she looks like a foot. Oh, and by the way lads, losing at home to League One Sheffield United in the Cup was about as dignified as Charlotte Crosby's rise to fame. Huddersfield Town 17-18. Huddersfield have literally had 1 season in the goddamn division. So I have to say last season, even though last season was one of the best in recent memory, Jesus Christ, they even beat Man United. Then again, who hasn't? Leicester City 01-02. Bottom of the league with 5 wins, 28 points, 12 from safety. This was a wretched season for Leicester, and a terrible way to say goodbye to Filbert Street. I mean, Arsenal celebrated the closure of Highbury with half the Tottenham team getting the shits. Leicester were just sent tumbling into the first division, with Mickey Adams acting as the 4th manager of this goddamn awful season. Liverpool 09-10. You might think,
oh, the worst Liverpool season was Roy Hodgson's one, of course. How dare you exclude him, Irish guy? I'm going to chuck a brick through your kitchen window.
That's cute. You think I can afford windows? Hear me out. Yes, Hodgson's brief stint at Anfield was probably enough to force Liverpool fans to smash up their stolen TVs, and the additions of Paul Konchesky and Christian Poulsen were almost enough to have him admitted to a goddamn nursing home. But King Kenny did save the day when he came in and managed to salvage 6th place and a win over Man United, so it wasn't a complete write-off. But the previous season was one of the most depressing in Liverpool's recent history. They finished 2nd in 08-09 and looked to actually be mounting a credible title challenge under Rafa Benitez. And then Xabi Alonso walked in the summer, having grown tired of the club's nonsensical pining for Gareth Barry. I mean, it was like asking out Helen the town drunk when you've got a page 3 model waiting for you at home. Albert Aquilani came in, who I can only assume won his career in a raffle, and the club finished 7th. 3rd in a piss-easy Champions League group, but at least there's the FA Cup, right? No, they lost in the 3rd round at home against Reading. Oh, and whoever's fault it was for allowing Rafa Benitez to play David and Gog nearly 40 times deserves a bullet between the eyes. Or just a slap in the face if you're not a raging psychopath. Man City 95-96. Some modern Man City fans might think,
oh, our worst season was when we lost the cup final to Wigan.
yes, finishing 2nd is such a ball ache, isn't it? Try 18th. They were relegated in 1996 after 7 years in the top flight. I mean, how do you expect to stay up when you wait until November to win a game? Man United 13-14. Growing up in Ireland, it seemed like almost everyone supported either Man United or Liverpool. And the 14-year-olds down the park drinking cans and robbing bikes who claim they supported Celtic despite the fact they couldn't name one other player than Henrik Larsson.
Of course, Celtic.
Who is your favourite player?
The fella in the green and white shirt.
While Liverpool were faffing around for Ryan Babel and Jermaine Pennant, United were winning everything in sight, so it must have felt so weird for them when this season happened. Sir Alex was gone, which was already really strange, and in his place was David Moyes, a man who'd never won so much as a raffle. They'd lost to Liverpool twice, Man City twice, West Brom, Everton twice, Newcastle, Tottenham, Chelsea, Stoke, Sunderland twice, Swansea City, Olympiacos. Jesus Christ, lads. Bayern Munich, it was the managerial equivalent of explosive diarrhea. All over the Old Trafford dugout. Newcastle 08-09. Simon Bird, you're a
Feisty one you are.
Yep, that was Joe Kinnear's first action at Newcastle, striding straight into a press conference 10 years ago, with his last job having been 6 months at Nottingham Forest in 2004, and calling everyone in the room a Christ above, the word was being flung around so fast and loose, you swore you were watching an unedited version of the Queen's speech. 08-09 is the epitome of a car crash season. First off, management had already scuppered Kevin Keegan's plans to sign Sami Hupia, Luka Modric and Bastian Schweinsteiger. They sold James Milner and replaced him with Cisco and Gonzalez, 2 players at the club nobody had ever seen kick a ball. This forced King Kev to storm out in September. Can you blame him? Joe Kinnear was brought in, swore at everyone until he was blue in the face, pissed off Charles Nzagwe enough to make him leave, sold Shea Given before bailing himself in February due to heart problems. Alan Shearer was drafted in a move that smacked of about as much desperation as Conor McGregor's latest whiskey adverts. He came on April Fool's Day, as did many Newcastle fans when they heard the news, probably into a rusty old sock. But maybe he was the real fool for thinking he could keep a team of overpaid mercenaries who didn't have a care in the world in the top flight. Southampton 04-05. The 04-05 season was about as enjoyable for Southampton fans as giving birth to a tennis racket. Christ above, I mean, the previous season they finished 12th. Before that they finished 8th and reached an FA Cup final. Now they ran through Paul Sturrock and Steve Wigley, who the is that guy, in the first few months before making a deal with the devil in December. Lowlights included getting smashed 4-1 by Portsmouth and of course finishing bottom of the league. Tottenham 93-94. I would say before Martin Jol came in, Tottenham were a really average, bang average Premier League team. It wasn't until he came in that they started challenging for Europe, and of course then they got the shits on the pitch. But until then they didn't really have any levels of expectation. I mean, it was just kind of a bottom half team. But I would say the 93-94 season was pretty bad. They came into that season with a lot of optimism with Ozzy Ardiles as the manager. It didn't go well. They finished 15th. Oh, and they were fined £600,000 and deducted 12 points for the following season after being found guilty by the FA of financial irregularities. Watford 06-07. Bottom of the league. It took them until November to win a damn game. As soon as Ashley Young left in January, that was effectively the club's way of picking up an air rifle and shooting themselves in the face. West Ham 09-10. Why am I choosing one of the seasons where West Ham stayed up? Am I mentally insane? Probably, but bear with me. Firstly, West Ham came into the season on the back of a 9th place finish the previous season. There was a lot of hope in the air. And then Gianfranco Zola seemingly forgot how to coach a football team. The club was fined for pitch invasions and a brawl against Millwall in the Cup, which saw a fan stabbed in a game where Frodo Baggins would have been proud. Midway through the season, David Gold and Sullivan took over the club. You know, two men who, according to West Ham fans, are the worst thing to happen to East London since the German Blitz. It was inevitable what was going to happen next year, and especially when you're appointing Avram Grant. That poor fella probably hasn't seen his toes since the 1960s. Wolves 11-12. This was Wolves' third consecutive season in the top flight. Mick McCarthy was still seducing housewives through the TV. Kevin Doyle was getting linked with Juventus, and they won their first 2 games.
Wolves for the Europa League.
No, just like the CGI nonsense in that Liam Neeson movie. Wolves were an abject disappointment. McCarthy was sacked in February after getting smashed 5-1 at home by West Brom. And you might think, okay, surely they've got someone experienced lined up to get them out of this mess. They might as well have given it to the tea lady for all the good Terry Connors did. Christ, about 10 defeats and 4 draws in his 14 games, relegating the club with 25 points. If that was an audition for a full-time position, that was the equivalent of forgetting your words, slurring your lines, and getting sick all over the director's face. Anyway, that's the end of the video, lads. If you disagree, let me know in the comment section below. What do you think was your worst season as a football fan? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram here. And as always, I'll talk to you in a while.